Can you hear us now?
I can hear you. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, but a little bit soft. Can you turn it a little bit louder?
A bit louder?
Soft, yeah. Can louder, please?
Wait a moment. I'm not sure how to do this. Hang on. Is it loud enough if I get close like this?
No, I still
no,
let me check. Is
okay,
it
okay.
It's okay now. It's okay now, David.
It's okay,
Thank you.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's okay now.
Okay.
Okay, so we will start in 2 minutes. I will say something to our teachers first, and then I will introduce you to your presentation, okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Do you want to check the screen sharing first?
Yeah, please do it.
Okay. I'm so sorry about what happened. This has never happened before. It was just terrible, terrible bad luck. Okay, so wait a moment. Share screen. Okay.
Yes, we can see your slide ready. I think it's
okay. And you can hear me okay, right?
Yeah, hear well, see well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Dạ vâng ạ, xin được kính chào các quý thầy cô ạ. Một lần nữa thì nhà xuất bản xin được gửi lời xin lỗi rất là chân thành tới các quý thầy cô vì sự cố kỹ thuật ngày hôm nay ạ. Vậy như thế thì cũng có thể thấy là mặc dù là các thiết bị công nghệ thì rất là hiện đại và phía đầu cầu ban tổ chức thì cũng đã chuẩn bị mọi thứ rất là chỉn chu và kỹ lưỡng, cũng đã test kỹ thuật từ lúc 1 giờ. Tuy nhiên thì đến đúng lúc 2 giờ thì lại xảy ra những cái sự cố kỹ thuật như thế này ạ. Thì xin lỗi các thầy cô, nhưng mà cũng từ đó thì có thể thấy rằng là vai trò các thầy cô chắc là còn phải rất lâu nữa mới có thể thay thế được ạ. Các thầy cô lên lớp thì vẫn luôn là những cái lựa chọn hàng đầu đối với học sinh ạ. Các thiết bị công nghệ thì sẽ chưa thể nào và chắc là rất là khó có thể thay thế được vị trí vai trò của thầy cô trong cái quá trình giảng dạy cho các em học sinh. Dạ vâng, em xin phép sẽ được bắt đầu hội thảo ngày hôm nay ạ. Vâng, xin nồng nhiệt được chào mừng các quý thầy cô đang tham gia hội thảo chuyên đề về giảng dạy tiếng Anh dành cho cấp trung học với bộ sách giáo khoa tiếng Anh Global Success của Nhà xuất bản Giáo dục Việt Nam ngày hôm nay. Em là Đỗ Thu Giang, biên tập viên của Nhà xuất bản, sẽ là người đồng hành cùng với diễn giả và các quý thầy cô trong buổi chiều hôm nay. Buổi hội thảo được tổ chức trực tuyến trên nền tảng Zoom và đồng thời cũng được livestream trên kênh YouTube và fanpage tiếng Anh Global Success. Vâng, trong hội thảo hôm nay thì em xin phép được trân trọng giới thiệu có sự tham gia của các quý vị đại biểu đến từ 63 sở giáo dục và đào tạo trên toàn quốc. Về phía nhóm tác giả, xin trân trọng giới thiệu có giáo sư tiến sĩ Hoàng Văn Vân là tổng chủ biên, cùng với các thầy cô là chủ biên, tác giả sách giáo khoa các khối lớp. Trân trọng giới thiệu các thầy cô là báo cáo viên, trainer của bộ sách. Hội thảo cũng có sự tham dự của các đại diện đến từ Việt Nam của Tập đoàn Giáo dục Pearson, là đơn vị đang đồng hành và hợp tác chặt chẽ với Nhà xuất bản Giáo dục Việt Nam trong việc biên soạn và xuất bản bộ sách tiếng Anh Global Success cấp trung học. Trân trọng giới thiệu thầy David Percy là cố vấn học thuật và giảng viên đào tạo của Pearson Education, là diễn giả của chúng ta ngày hôm nay. Vâng, và đặc biệt thì xin trân trọng được giới thiệu và cảm ơn các thầy cô giáo tiếng Anh trên toàn quốc đã dành thời gian buổi chiều ngày hôm nay để tham dự hội thảo của bộ sách tiếng Anh Global Success. Vâng, kính thưa các quý thầy cô, đối với các bộ sách giáo khoa của Nhà xuất bản Giáo dục Việt Nam nói chung và bộ sách giáo khoa tiếng Anh Global Success nói riêng, thì Nhà xuất bản vẫn luôn hỗ trợ các thầy cô hết sức để làm sao có thể giúp các thầy cô sử dụng và triển khai bộ sách một cách thuận lợi và hiệu quả. Và ngoài các công cụ hỗ trợ dạy và học hiện đang được tích hợp rất đa dạng và cập nhật thường xuyên trên hệ sinh thái tài nguyên học liệu.vn, thì chuỗi hội thảo hội nghị chuyên đề hàng năm với sự tham gia của các diễn giả trong và ngoài nước là những tâm huyết mà nhà xuất bản muốn gửi gắm và muốn dành đến các quý thầy cô để chia sẻ đến các quý thầy cô những phương pháp, những đường hướng giảng dạy tiếng Anh đổi mới, cập nhật và hiện đại, đồng thời cũng rất thực tiễn để các thầy cô có thể áp dụng cho những điều kiện thực tế ở nhiều địa phương khác nhau. Vâng, trong tháng 5 năm nay thì chúng ta đã có dịp gặp gỡ với thầy David với một hội thảo về phương pháp học tập tích hợp nội dung và ngôn ngữ. Thầy đã chia sẻ đến quý thầy cô những kỹ thuật, những bước dạy rất là cụ thể đối với những bài học clue trong sách giáo khoa tiếng Anh Global Success. Và có lẽ là có nhiều thầy cô ở đây cũng đã tham dự hội thảo đó rồi, và em cũng chắc chắn là đã có những cái nội dung mà các thầy cô đã có thể tiếp thu và áp dụng trong quá trình lên lớp thực tế của mình. Vâng, quay trở lại với nội dung của buổi hội thảo ngày hôm nay, thì với chủ đề về phương pháp dạy ngôn ngữ theo đường hướng giao tiếp mà chúng ta gọi tắt là CLT, thì thầy David sẽ chia sẻ và thảo luận với các quý thầy cô về những nguyên tắc cơ bản của phương pháp CLT, những chiến lược CLT cốt yếu mà các thầy cô có thể áp dụng cho những bài học trong bộ sách giáo khoa tiếng Anh Global Success, và lấy ví dụ minh họa là những hoạt động học tập rất cụ thể trong sách giáo khoa tiếng Anh lớp 9 và lớp 12 sẽ được triển khai cho năm học 2024-2025. Và bên cạnh đó là những bí quyết để xây dựng môi trường học tập tiếng Anh một cách tích cực và hiệu quả. Phần trình bày của thầy David sẽ kéo dài trong vòng 90 phút và sau đó là 30 phút dành cho thảo luận. Và nếu trong hôm nay có thầy cô nào mà chưa có thời gian có thể theo dõi toàn bộ nội dung của buổi tập huấn, thì các thầy cô vẫn có thể xem lại trọn vẹn buổi tập huấn trên kênh YouTube và fanpage của tiếng Anh Global Success. Vâng, và bây giờ thì em xin phép sẽ được mời thầy David bắt đầu cái phần trình bày của mình ạ. So now it's my pleasure to introduce to you Mr. David Percy, a teacher, trainer, and consultant of Pearson Education. David has more than 30 years of experience in ELT, and he has delivered a lot of workshops at numerous schools and universities, and presented at different conferences across Southeast Asia and Australia. And David is passionate about the evolution of teaching methodology to develop the skills for students in the 21st century. So Teacher David, thank you a lot and welcome you to the workshop today. We are so excited to hear your sharing, and the stage is yours now, please. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And first of all, I'd like to apologize to everybody because I don't know what happened, but in the area where I am, the internet was cut off. Maybe someone was drilling a hole in the road. And it is maybe relevant because we are talking about communicative language teaching. And sometimes maybe we rely too much on technology. Sometimes technology is not always the answer. And I think it's particularly true when we talk about communicative language teaching, as we will see. Technology has a place, but it is not everything. So first of all, as I said, I'm really sorry about what happened earlier. Can I just check, can you see the screen? You can see my screen now, yeah? The PowerPoint, yes? Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much. Okay, so we'll be looking today at communicative language teaching in general. Now, I know that this is something that we've all talked about, maybe for some of us for 30 years. It's certainly the case that it is, we need to refresh our ideas, I think. And my experience is that in most classrooms, they are maybe semi-communicative, and I'm sure you can all give me some great ideas. At the same time, I hope that some of what we talk about today will be useful. So we'll be looking at some key principles, some ideas, some strategies. These are ideas from my own experience, so maybe not exactly the same as you would find in a typical training course. So I hope these will be useful for you. And creating the right environment. So being able to communicate effectively also means being able, feeling comfortable and happy in the teaching and learning environment. Otherwise, it's very difficult to communicate effectively. Okay, now, first of all, I have a very short task for you. All right, I hope you'll have a little bit of fun here. I'd like you to look at the tree, and I would like you, I hope you are sitting next to someone that you like. all right? So I'd like you to decide, where are you on the tree in terms of communicative language teaching, okay? Do you think you are at the very top of the tree already? If you are at the top of the tree, maybe you can go outside and have a coffee while we do this workshop, all right? If you are somewhere in the middle, that's great. If you think you are swimming at the bottom of the tree, hopefully this workshop will be useful for you. So just have a look at the tree. Where are you at the moment? Feel free to use the chat box, because I can actually see the chat box, which is good. So where are you on the tree? Okay, so where do you think you are at the moment? And then we will compare at the end of the session. Yeah, okay, this is where you are in Vietnam, which is also very nice to know. I am not in Vietnam at the moment. Maybe if I was in Vietnam at the moment, I would not have technical problems. So you're in the middles, the people in Ventre, in the middle of the tree. Okay. So if you're in the middle of the tree, then, oh, someone's at the top of the tree. If you're at the top of the tree, maybe you should be training me next to the tree. Wonderful. Okay. All right. Well, let's see some a little bit of background to communicative language teaching. And I think the background, someone said they've fallen down the tree. Well, hopefully we can climb back up again. Okay. So Del Hines, one of the founding fathers and mothers of communicative language teaching methodology. So he said that communicative competence involves knowing when to speak, when not to speak, with whom, where, and in what manner. So maybe you have friends or relatives who, or people that you know, who don't know when to speak. So this is also part of communicative competence. We want our students to be able to know when and how to communicate. And this quotation, I think, is very important, very key to understanding what we mean by CLT. What people want to do through language is more important than mastery of the language. So we have a lot of people who are in the middle of the tree. That's great. Now, let's just look at an example of something that goes on in classrooms all over the world. And this is an example of something I think is not communicative. So the teacher shows some keys. Maybe they show the real keys, which is fantastic. However, the lesson involves maybe gap fill. Learn the vocabulary. These are keys. Oh, we use keys to open doors. What are these? Okay, now all of this is relevant. It's we need to know what keys are. But maybe we can be more realistic. When you grow up in Vietnam and you learn Vietnamese, you learn by doing. So if we can do this in English, then our teaching will probably be quicker and more effective. So communicative competence, I think, would be looking at a locked cupboard and you don't have the keys, you say, pass me the keys. All right. Do you have the keys? Would you mind giving me the keys? Are those the right keys? Keys, please. Yeah, all of these are communicating for a reason, right? We see the cupboard and it is locked and we need the keys, all right? So, so the students are actually learning the vocabulary by using it in a real communicative way, okay? And all of these that you see and many, many more are correct. None of them is wrong. Maybe we would like them to learn the expression, would you mind giving me the keys? We might want them to learn this grammar, but it's not important if they use this expression or another expression that has the same function. Okay, now a little test for you. Maybe you can do this together with your best friend who is sitting next to you. Okay. Okay. Hello, everyone from THPT Le Hoi Don. I can't. My Vietnamese pronunciation is very, very bad. I'm sorry. So, what I'd like you to do is put the words in the correct spaces. So these are features of a good communicative language teaching lesson, right? See if you can put the words in the right spaces. Yeah, excellent. We've got some good answers already. Okay, some of you have moved on to the second one. That's great. Okay. All right. We won't spend too long on this. I am going to show you the answers now. So I would like you to see if you have the correct answers. So, features of a good communicative language teaching classroom. Learners work in pairs or small groups. Every learner has the opportunity to speak. Now, that doesn't mean that every learner is going to speak in every class. We know that, but they have the opportunity. And effective communication is more important than accuracy. I'm afraid, I think I might have forgotten to put that word in, so my apologies there. And the teacher is an advisor or guide. So the learners are responsible for communication in the classroom. Okay, there are 3 core principles of language use. A bit more difficult now. See if you can guess the missing words here. What are the 3 missing words? Target language, maybe not target language, because with communicative language teaching, we are less concerned with using specific language, but making sure that the language is effective at communicating an idea. Aha, someone got the correct answer for the first one. Okay. All right, if you okay, I'll give everyone a little bit more time just to think about this. And then I will give you my answers to this. Okay. So the first principle is that language should be authentic. So, for example, when maybe we wanted to open the sports cupboard, we need the keys. So this is an authentic situation. It's not important whether the learner uses perfect English. What is important is that they are able to make it clear that they need the keys to open the sports cupboard. Okay? And in order to do this, there will be meaningful interaction. So one of the problems with language learning for many hundreds of years has been that learners sometimes are learning on their own. Yeah, there is no meaningful interaction. Now, meaningful interaction can be with a text that you read. It could be with a podcast that you listen to, okay? But there will usually be some interaction in some way with another person, okay? And finally, the communicative language teaching is a learner-centered approach. So ultimately, a good lesson, it will become more and more the case that the learners decide what language to use, what problems they want to solve, and how they want to solve them. So let's have a look at an example of authentic language use. Now, you may recognize me in one of these pictures. Can you match number 1 and number 2 with A and B? Very easy task. Okay, so if you look at picture number 1, so the teachers in Da Nang have got the correct idea here. So picture number 1, the answer is B. I am interested in this book. So I want to know more. And so reading this book, there is an authentic reason to use the language. Right? I am a teacher. In fact, my mother recommended this book to me, and so I read it, and I found it a wonderful book, very inspiring. Number two, well, I'm not really reading because the book is at IKEA in Thailand. It is a Swedish shop, and the book is in Swedish, and I do not understand the book, but it's I think it's a nice photograph, and it is good for Instagram. So so two different reasons to read, but as most of you have said, the real reason that we would read rather than just posing for a camera is because we're interested and we want to know more about the topic. So this comes to my next point, that we always need a reason to communicate. Okay, so it could be a reason to read. When we read, we are communicating with a text. When we listen, we are communicating with a listening text. In the modern day, it might be a podcast, it might be a news item, it might be a radio program, or it might just be a conversation that you want to listen to. Maybe you want to hear some gossip. We need a reason to write. We need a reason to speak. Okay, so how does this relate to the teacher? Well, for me, the key point is that for communication to be authentic, then the teacher needs to think about how to generate interest initially. And this can be difficult. It can be difficult when you have 50 students in a class, but it's not impossible. My first tip for you, from my experience, is it's always a good idea to close the book, right? Keep the book closed as long as possible so that the students actually, you are building up their interest and they want to know, they want to open the book, all right? One of, when we say to students, okay, today's lesson, we're going to open on page 21. And unfortunately, this results in a lot of students getting bored right at the beginning, because in real life, nobody will tell you to open a book on page 21, right? In real life, that never happens. So in real life, it's far more likely that someone will say, someone will say, oh, did you hear about this? Can we talk about this? Oh, you should read this. Yeah, then that we want to create that in the classroom. So if we look at these images here, different types of reading or listening. So in each case, the person has a reason. This man reading the Vietnamese newspaper, he's opening it, see, there is something that he finds interesting, that he wants to know more about. Okay, so we want to recreate this situation in the classroom. Now, there are different ways that we can generate interest. So which of these do you use in your classrooms? Do you use pictures? Do you show a quick video clip, maybe from YouTube? Do you have a discussion around the topic? Do you use words or realia. Okay, so someone has mentioned pictures and video. Someone mentioned all. That's great. Right. Okay. Now, interestingly, some people have said all. Very few have mentioned words. Okay, so we can use pictures. Now, the book that you are using, or you are going to be using, has some really great engaging photos that you can use to get the students interested. Again, what I would do here, I would say, okay, I want you to open the book on page 33, right? Maybe I'll do a little trick with the students. I'll say, okay, you've got 10 seconds to look at this picture, memorize what you can, and then close the book, tell your partner, all right? And what you'll find then is that students maybe cannot remember everything, okay? So they then have a reason to open the book again. And this is what we actually do in real life. Real life, we might hear something. You think, oh, that's interesting. I need to check. Or maybe you read something, or you see an advertisement and you want to know more, so you see it again, all right? And then you will remember more. We can do all of these, okay? But one thing I like to do is use words, because that way, not only are we using the vocabulary that they already know. So if we, for example, we look at the picture in the previous slide, maybe they're not, they're just going to use the vocabulary that they know already, which might be limited. Now, with words, what I might do is I might introduce them to some new words that they're not so familiar with, or maybe they know them, but they haven't thought of using them. Okay, and I can use these words to introduce a topic. Okay, so I'm going to dictate 5 words to you, okay? And I want you to write them down. Okay, are you ready? Give me a thumbs up if you're ready. I'm looking to see some thumbs. Yeah, okay. All right, so we've got a few people who are ready. That's excellent. Okay, I'm going to read the 5 words to you now. So are you ready? You need to write them down. Physical, mental, counselor, well-balanced, priority. And no, I will not repeat the words. No. All right. Do you want me to say them again? Ah, someone got 2 of them. Excellent. All right. Just for you. One more time. Physical, mental, counselor, well-balanced, priority. Some people are hearing biology, but I didn't say biology. I didn't say biologist. Ah, now someone got all of the words. All right, I think we should give them a round of applause. Well done. So now the students have a reason to open the book. So I might say, okay, we're going to open the book. and I will show you the words. All right, so you've got a reason and you can check. Now, I believe that to use a word effectively, there are three things you need. First, obviously, you need the form. You need to know if it's a verb, a noun, an adjective. You need to know the meaning, but you also need to know the pronunciation, right? Because if you don't know the pronunciation, you will not be able to use it correctly, and you will not be able to hear it correctly. As we know in Vietnam, listening is often a big challenge for learners. So if you now mark the stress, or you ask the students to mark the stress in the words, I'll give you just 30 seconds to think about it. Maybe say those words out loud. Do you know the words? Do you know where the stress is? Okay, and then I will, in a moment, I will show you the correct position for the stress. Yes, some of them are first, but not all of them. So, yeah, I think you got some of them right, some of them not. Yeah, so all of the top line, the stress is on the first syllable, but the bottom line, the stress is actually on the second syllable. We say well balanced, well balanced, yeah, and priority, yeah. So so we can all learn from a little exercise like this, and then we can ask the students to put the words in sentences. And again, this is more communicative than simply writing a definition. Nobody in real life is going to ask you to write a definition of a word, but you might be in a position where you need to use it. So I might ask the students here, is your English homework a priority this afternoon, this evening? In my experience, unfortunately, it's not always their first priority. Okay, so why did I do this? Because I'm introducing a topic from the book, okay? So if we have gone through this process previously, we'll be able to talk about what it means, a counselor. Maybe not every school has counselors. We'll be able to understand the difference between physical and mental health, and a well-balanced diet, a well-balanced lifestyle. So these are all things that we can discuss before we go to this diet, this conversation. This conversation could be we could then do it as a role play. And a tip that I have here is that this kind of lesson can be very easy for teachers. We don't need a complicated lesson plan. We don't need extra material. So, for example, these words that I have introduced by dictating them and discussing them are actually in the book, but they come in the book, they come after the reading and after the role play. There is no reason why we shouldn't look ahead and use these words at the beginning of the class to generate interest. It's probably a lot easier than looking for photos videos and making sure that those are useful and appropriate. And I might then ask, what topic are we going to discuss? So you'll see here, there are two very useful exercises. These exercises could be done before the main lesson rather than after. And that way they're generating interest. Okay, so I can see some people already doing the vocabulary exercises. That's great, but I want to focus more on using this vocabulary now in a communicative way. Okay, so then we might decide to brainstorm some ideas and questions, right? And this is a case, I think, where the stronger students will be able to help the weaker students. It's not the case that every student, if you have 50 students in the class, maybe only 10 of them will be able to come up with the questions, because it's not just a case of their level of English. Maybe they need a little creativity. Maybe some students are better at writing, some students are better with grammar. So I would get them in groups, think of some questions to ask about these issues. So, for example, are physical and mental health equally important to you? Would you speak to a school counselor about health issues? Yeah, not everybody would. Some people feel comfortable to do so, some people don't. Is your health a priority? How would you rank health, money, happiness, education, and family? Yeah, so where there's a lot of things we can do here. One thing I try to do while I put the students in groups and I say, right, I want you to come up with some questions. Of course, some classes will struggle, so I will make sure that I have some questions in reserve so I can prompt them. Yeah. Okay. And then if we have done this with the book closed, my question would be, would your students now be more or less interested in the topic? And I would say almost certainly they will be more interested at this point. So this is classic communicative language teaching, because we are actually giving them a reason to want to learn more, a reason to read, a reason to engage with the text. And then after they have learned something from the text, what do we normally do? Well, in real life, we react to the text. Okay, so different ways that we react. We might just talk to someone. We might share something on social media. Yeah. We might say to our friends, hey, what do you think of this? Yeah. You should read this. Or, this is something I'm going to mention to my friend, right? Maybe he needs to think more about sleeping well, and less about fitness and diet. Yeah, so we can relate it to real life. Okay, and then meaningful interaction. Again, we can use the book to check comprehension beforehand. But if your students if you feel that they are quite a strong class, maybe maybe you don't actually need to do the comprehension part. You could skip over it, or you could do it quite quickly. And then what we want to do is react to the text, because this is something that we really do in real life. So, do you agree with everything that the counsellor says? Is there a health counsellor in our school? Would you add any more advice to the students? Yeah. So I'll give you a little question now. What advice, what health advice would you give to your students? Right, so for example, I would tell them to limit screen time. Yeah, do more exercise. Very good. So which exercise would you suggest? Would it be the same for all students? Yeah. Go to bed early. Yeah. So maybe some students would benefit from playing team sports. Yeah, eating less fast food. Why would they want to eat fast food in Vietnam? You have such good food. Go join, do morning exercise. Now that's, I don't know if they will listen to you, but you could try. Outdoor activities, I completely agree with you. Yeah, having enough sleep. Right. It's difficult, though, for teenagers to get enough sleep, isn't it, when school starts so early? Relax. So if your students are very stressed, maybe they should relax. How should they relax? Is it, in my view, sometimes they think relaxing is going on social media. Maybe it would be far better for them to spend time away from social media and relax in other ways. Yeah, play sports, certainly. And music. Nobody has mentioned music. So maybe they play a musical instrument, or they dance. So what we've done here is we have interacted with the text before, during, and after. Okay, and I think this is really important. The book doesn't need to be open all the time. Yeah, this is the great thing about a book, unlike a screen. Okay, with the screen, it's very difficult to know what they are looking at. With a book, open the book, do a task, close the book, react to the task in a communicative way, right? So closing the book is a very, very useful strategy. Okay, less soft drinks and a balanced diet. I agree with all of your ideas. I would also add music. Okay. All right. And we can go beyond that because we're talking about advice, well, why not turn that into a role play, which is a very authentic situation, because it means you're using the language in a meaningful, real life way. So you might get the students to interview each other. They might do it in groups. And here we have an exercise where the students are practicing grammar, okay, but in a communicative way. Okay, so for example, number 5, you're able to make a delicious pizza when you have all the needed ingredients. So I think we can extend that. Okay, you can say, I'll make you a delicious pizza, or I can make you a delicious pizza if you buy the ingredients and you wash the dishes. Okay, so allowing the students to use a little creativity will make the activity both more authentic, more meaningful, and more memorable. So, can you give me some other ideas? Okay. What do I need to do for you to cook me a delicious pho? Maybe I need to wash the dishes. What else? Let's see if we get some ideas in the chat box. Okay, we seem to have gone a little quiet here. Okay. There are some great ideas here in the book when we move towards the end of the lesson. Okay, writing tips for one of the following situations. And note that the students are being asked to work in groups. So a friend of yours cannot get a good night's sleep. What tips would you give that person? And notice it says present your tips to the class. Now, a lot of teachers get a little nervous about this. How and when should we present? Well, I would say, why not present in the form of a poster that will be permanently or semi-permanently on display. So it's, again, very authentic. It's a great way of reinforcing the language that has been learned. Okay. So in real life, we share conversations. Okay. In real life, we don't simply have a conversation and move on. We often talk to somebody else about the conversation that we have had. And again, I think this is done very well in this book. So rather than simply saying to our students, have a conversation with a partner. It's better to have a conversation with a partner and then share with another partner or another group. And then you can talk about what you learned about your classmates. So maybe I talked with Sam about what she does to keep healthy, and she recommended drinking hot milk before going to bed. So, so it's quite open how the students share the information, but it's very authentic and very useful. Okay. Now let's have another look at communicative activity, or how to make an activity more communicative from level 12. But before we do this, I'd like to a reminder of what we mean by communicative language learning. What do we need to do? What do we need to make an activity communicative? Okay, well, this is the type of conversation that I often used to have when I started teaching with my students. Might say, speak to your partner about what you did at the weekend. So they asked their partner, say, what did you do this weekend? And it turns out they did the same thing, because they're friends, or they live together, or they go to the same school. So this conversation is not communicative. Okay, it is absurd, right? But it happens a lot in classrooms around the world. In reality, there is no reason for these two students to communicate, because they both have the same information. So we really need an information gap. We need the students to have a reason to share, right? They don't have exactly the same situation, same information as each other. So let's look at another example, as I said, this time from level 12. Okay. This time I'm quite happy with just using the book to generate interest. And I think we find that the higher the level, the more the less you probably need to keep closing the book, because the students' level of understanding is that much greater. So I think this is a nice way to introduce a text on the evolution of robots. Let's just see how much the students know, how much they can guess, and just use it as a basis of discussion. Okay. And then if we look at this text, now this text is interesting for me or for you, but it might be quite daunting for the students. So what could we do to, how can we use this in a more communicative way? Okay. Well, yeah, so someone said the problem is no communication. Yeah, so the secret here is to make sure that different students have different information. So one thing we could do is put students in groups, and each student reads a different paragraph. So this is something, this technique, jigsaw reading, it's an old technique. Sometimes I think we forget to use it. We don't need to make any photocopies. We don't need to use technology. we can just tell different groups to read a different paragraph or a different section. And then, and this is important, they should close the book to discuss what they have read. Again, this is quite authentic. In real life, if you read something interesting on Facebook or you hear something interesting on the news, on TV, you talk about it. You don't turn the TV on again. You don't necessarily show the article to the person. You talk about it. Okay, so this is a communicative strategy, and it is more challenging and more fun. You can always allow the students to open the book again if they need to check after a few minutes. Okay, and then because you have mixed groups who have read different sections, they can complete the comprehension exercises together. And they are, because they have read different sections, they will have to communicate in order to complete the exercises effectively. And finally, so we talked about before the text, while reading the text, and then after the text. So it doesn't matter if we're talking about a reading, a listening, a video, any other kind of input, or even input from the teacher. It's important to have these three stages, okay? And then after we react to the text and relate it to the local context. So one of the great things about this book, this series, is because it is made in Vietnam, the questions relate to Vietnam, which makes them much more meaningful. So again, returning to this idea that real communication, communicative approach means meaningful communication. So communicating about Vietnam, what types of AI are widely used in Vietnam, and very relevant. So some of you on the chat have mentioned ChatGPT. We don't have time today to talk about ChatGPT, but this could be another workshop. We could spend another couple of hours just talking about the possibilities with ChatGPT, because I think it is a very useful tool if it is used in the right way. Okay, now let's move on to the next part, and that is creating a positive environment for communication. So one thing is, of course, it's great to have lots of strategies, methods that we have that will hopefully result in communication, in real communication in the classroom, but they will not succeed if the students are not comfortable and are not, do not have the right mindset. Okay, so I've got a task for you now. Can you look at these, A, B, C, and D, and write in the chat box, which of these do you think helps to create a positive environment for communicative language teaching? So someone said A and C. C and D. Someone said all. Okay. Right. I'm very, very pleased to see your answers. Some of you have focused on one or two, but yes, I would agree that the correct answer is all of these. Of course, it's difficult. Some of you probably have very large classrooms, but hopefully, if you're seeing the students on a regular basis, you will get to know their names and hopefully understanding their situation. So as I mentioned before, students, it's not always their fault that they don't sleep enough. For example, the school does start very early. Sometimes they have genuine reasons why they don't get enough sleep. So being a little relaxed in a classroom where we want to encourage communication, I think is important. And talking to individual learners about their interests. So even if we do not share the same interests, it's amazing how much we can learn from our students. So I try to have chats with every single one. Not obviously, it may be that some of them you only manage to speak to once a month or once every 2 weeks, but it really makes a difference to their perception of us as teachers. And noticing individual learners' progress and the things they find difficult. So no, we can't notice everything, but we might notice a particular student previously didn't say anything and they're beginning to participate more in class. So praising them for good behavior, praising them for working hard. These will all make a big difference to the environment in the classroom. But there's more we can do. And part of being relaxed, and I learned this many years ago in a conference where the speaker talked about what he called the fifth skill. Right, I'm going to ask you in the chat box, what do you think the fifth skill means? What do you think I mean? So please put your ideas in the chat box. Anyone who has an idea. Okay, critical thinking, stimulate speaking, talking to yourself. Right, a lot of you are pretty close to what I'm thinking. Elicit critical thinking. Keep going, keep going. Okay, I'll give you another 30 seconds to come up with some more ideas. Okay, so a few of you mentioned critical thinking, and somebody mentioned talking to yourself, and I think that's very, very true. Observing all of these, I think all of you are also correct, but I'm thinking particularly in terms of a communicative language teaching classroom, a classroom where we want our students to feel comfortable and confident. And I would say talking to yourself, yes. Critical thinking, yes. But more widely, it's actually just formulating words in your head. So formulating what you want to say, because it's very, very difficult for some students, even if you ask them in Vietnamese, it may be very difficult for them to come up with ideas. So if we think of this like idea loading in our head, it might take the form of talking to yourself. It might take the form of, as you say, it's a kind of cognitive skill. Yeah. And students think in different ways, right? Some of them communicate in different ways, even in their first language. So I think particularly native speakers like myself sometimes forget that students need some time. So the idea, I'm not sure if you've used this term before, think, pair, share. So the idea is that for every activity, you allow students time to think by themselves, and then to you put them in pairs where they can share with each other. And then finally, the pairs, they might interact with another pair or a bigger group, or they might interact with the whole class. So if we don't do this, we'll tend to find that certain students dominate. Certain students will be speaking most of the time, and other students will be very quiet. And it's not because they do not have the ability. It's often that they just need time to think and to catch up and maybe start we say activate the schemata, so to activate the part of our brains connected with this topic. So it's important, I think, to build confidence, to make students feel comfortable sharing opinions, because maybe at home, not every student is comfortable at home. So if they're not comfortable at home, or maybe they're not comfortable in some other aspects of their life, they may not feel comfortable in our class as well. So it's important that they feel able to share opinions. So having time to think, having time to share with one person rather than with a whole group initially. And finally, it's also important that they should feel able to make mistakes. So if we push them too fast and they have to communicate with the whole class, it can be quite scary for some students, and it can have a negative impact on their learning. So I would say there are three aspects to creating the right environment for communication. The first one, we've looked at creating a positive environment. So different things we can do to develop rapport, to develop a connection with the students, giving them time to think. allowing them to share in pairs and small groups before they share with the whole class. Okay. We can also think about how we arrange the classroom and also how we use technology. Now, today's session is only an hour and a half, so I'm not going to go into detail in using technology. But what I will say is that if the aim is speaking, I would be quite strict with how technology is used. In fact, personally, I wouldn't allow it in my classroom. I would use technology for communicative writing because I think it is a very, very effective tool. Or if students are making presentations together, it's very, very effective because it encourages collaboration. But if we use technology in a speaking activity, it tends to limit the amount of speaking that's actually going on. So I would always ask myself, is the technology going to help, or is it actually going to hinder? All right. If it's going to actually result in the activity being less communicative, then I would not use technology. But another thing that many of us don't think about is the seating arrangements, because in some cases, yeah, it's difficult to rearrange the class, but different types of seating arrangements will encourage communication for different types of activities. So for you, which one do you think will encourage more communication? So one of you has mentioned round table. A lot of people mentioning, yeah, okay, keep going. Okay, so a lot of people saying round table. A few people have mentioned the horseshoe, pair pods. Right, yeah, you're right. So sometimes the room isn't large enough. Okay. A lot of different answers to this question. Okay. So I notice a lot of people mentioning the round table. I think the round table can be a very effective tool, but maybe depending on the activity, we might want to encourage students to work in pairs. The horseshoe allows the teacher to walk around in the center and monitor, which is very effective. Even a traditional seating arrangement might be quite effective for presentations, for example. But my point here is that most of us do not change the seating, all right? We just accept it. So, and sometimes changing the seating, changing where individual students sit, changing who they sit next to, is a very effective tool. Similarly, if we want our students to work in groups, then arranging them, the seating so that they are sitting in groups is going to encourage that situation to happen. If we want them to be in pairs to discuss an idea together with one other partner, then it makes sense to seat them in pairs. So my point here is all of them have their place, but if it's possible, then this is something the teacher can do before the class, or at the beginning of the class, or even during the class. The students can help us. It's not something we have to do ourselves. And sometimes the seating is fixed. I know that is sometimes the case in Vietnam. So if the furniture is fixed, it doesn't mean that the students are fixed. So we can, for example, ask the students at the end of a row and the beginning of the row to swap over, and then you will immediately have or just get one student to move from the beginning to the end of the row and all the students to move up one, then you have new pairs. But when you have a very large class, one strategy I use is for each student at the beginning of the term, give them a letter, A, B, C, or D. You could also give them the name of a fruit, the name of a city, could be anything. So you could say, today, I want all the A's and C's to sit together, okay? And then I would like the A's and the D's to sit together. So you can easily change this if they all have a letter, okay, or a number or a name. So that's arranging the classroom. Okay, we're going to finish off today by looking at some general tips for encouraging a communicative classroom, and then we will have a quick review, and then there will be a little time for people to ask questions if you have questions for me. Okay, so the first thing I would say is always give students the chance to add to activities. So earlier, we looked at an example where the students said, I can make you a pizza if, right? And then we can, rather than it simply being a grammar activity, we can add to that. And you could say, well, what about you? What would you like? What can you cook? What would persuade you to cook for your friends? and allow them to the chance to add their ideas to any activities. We also looked at the case where we were asking about advice, health advice, and allowing them to use their creativity. In this case, we might get them to make a poster or a presentation. The thing I like about posters is that they are a physical record. They will go onto the walls of the class and they will help the students to remember what they've learned. Third tip, which we've mentioned before, is that students inevitably need thinking or preparation time. So it's important to allow plenty of time for the completion of tasks. Now, I know that quite often we feel that we're under pressure to complete the syllabus, but I think it's much better to make a complete, holistic lesson with enough preparation, time for preparation by the students, and plenty of time for discussion, and plenty of time for reaction. So this before, during, and after communication. And this will result not only in a more relaxed class, but also a more communicative class and more effective learning than trying to do too much in too short a time. Now, I'm going to give you another task. See if you can guess these last three tips. What are the missing words? What do you think are the missing words in these tips? So feel free to write in the chat box. Okay, we've got a couple of ideas. Changing the seat is a good idea. Changing position. Changing roles, true. I'm going to give you a few more minutes. A representative, yes, I agree. Okay. We're getting closer to not only the end of the workshop, but some good answers here. Right, I will give you my answers to these questions in a moment. Okay, so the first one, some of you said changing roles or changing activities or changing methodology. This is true. That's fine, but I think a very simple technique is changing partners, and the seating, changing the seats is a good way to do that. Or, as we mentioned before, and the book actually gives us some ideas for this, not only sharing ideas in a pair, in a group, but then relaying, reporting what we have discussed with another group. And also using the think, pair, share technique that we discussed earlier. Secondly, especially for groups that might be a little shy, appoint a note taker and a speaker or a representative for each group, and change these regularly. Make sure that it's not always the same student that is the speaker or the note taker. This is a way of encouraging the students to work together and collaborate. And finally, use technology if it increases effective communication. And my feeling is that with speaking, it does not, but it can certainly help in making writing more communicative, because it can be used as a collaborative tool, for example, on shared documents like Google Docs, Google Slides, also on platforms such as Canva for presentations. Okay, so those are my answers there. Now, it's important that we don't just finish the workshop there. Hopefully, there are some things that you will be able, some ideas that you'll be able to take and use in the classroom. I'm sure there are many things you can teach me as well, but I hope that that this workshop has been useful for you. So what I'd like you to do now, just to review, see if you can answer these questions just to see if we can remind ourselves of some of the key points that we have covered today. Yeah, time is nearly up, so
yes, David, we still have some time for Q&A session.
okay. Yes, I'm so sorry. It's quite late for some of you. And that, of course, I'm so sorry about the technology. So if some people need to leave, that's, I think, understandable, but I will make sure that I will stay as long as you need me.
Okay, so thank you so much for your sharing. That I'm sure that our teachers have got a lot of useful information and tips that they can apply in the classrooms. So before we come into the Q&A session, I would like to make some summarize in Vietnamese with our teachers, so I can make sure that our teacher can get some important things after your presentation.
Thank you very
Vâng ạ,
much.
kính thưa các thầy cô ạ, chắc hẳn là sau cái bài thuyết trình, phần chia sẻ của thầy David thì các thầy cô cũng đã có được cho mình những cái thông tin rất là hữu ích đúng không ạ? Về phương pháp dạy học và đặc biệt là dạy tiếng Anh thông qua đường hướng giao tiếp, thì trong cái phần trình bày của mình thì thầy David cũng đã nhấn mạnh một điều mà chúng ta cũng vẫn luôn để tâm rất là lâu nay khi quá trình chúng ta dạy tiếng Anh cho các học sinh, đó là cái năng lực giao tiếp chính là cái mục tiêu mà chúng ta luôn luôn hướng tới, đó là cái chìa khóa để giúp các bạn học sinh có thể sử dụng tiếng Anh trong môi trường thực tế đúng không ạ? Vâng, và trong phần trình bày của mình thì thầy David cũng đã đưa ra chia sẻ với chúng ta 3 cái nguyên tắc gọi là cốt lõi đối với phương pháp CLT. Thứ nhất đó là sử dụng ngôn ngữ một cách thực tế sát với cả đời thực đúng không ạ? Thứ hai là những cái tương tác có ý nghĩa, và thứ ba là cái cách tiếp cận mà người học là trung tâm. Và để có thể có được những cái giao tiếp thực tế thì chúng ta sẽ phải làm thế nào để tạo được cái sự quan tâm đối với học sinh trong những cái giờ học tiếng Anh của mình. Và trong bộ sách tiếng Anh Global Success thì nhóm tác giả cũng như là ban biên tập cũng đã cố gắng đưa vào lồng ghép những cái chủ đề mà các em đang quan tâm, những chủ đề mà thu hút được nhiều sự chú ý trong xã hội để có thể tạo nên cái sự quan tâm hứng thú với các em. Và những cái nhiệm vụ học tập trong sách giáo khoa tiếng Anh Global Success, và đặc biệt là những cái nhiệm vụ học tập ở tiếng Anh lớp 9 và lớp 12 thì cũng đã đều được thiết kế để có thể đưa các em từ cái việc kích thích sự hứng thú và quan tâm đến đưa ra những cái tình huống thực tế và hữu ích trong đời sống để các em có thể có được những cái sự thực hành ngôn ngữ một cách thật nhất và hữu ích nhất. Vâng, và trong phần chia sẻ tiếp đó thì thầy cũng đã nói đến cái việc là làm sao chúng ta có thể tạo ra một cái môi trường học tập phù hợp đối với cả phương pháp CLT. Trong đó thì là đưa ra cách thức, những cái ý tưởng, những cái gợi ý để tạo ra một môi trường tích cực, rồi hướng dẫn cách làm sao để chúng ta có thể sắp xếp lớp học ở chỗ ngồi cho các em nó phù hợp cho những hoạt động giao tiếp, và cũng đưa ra gợi ý sử dụng và công nghệ trong những bài học của mình. Vâng, với công nghệ thì thực sự là những công cụ hỗ trợ rất là hiệu quả đối với giáo viên, nhưng mà chúng ta cũng có thể thấy rằng vai trò của giáo viên thì rất là khó có thể thay thế đúng không ạ? Công nghệ chỉ có thể hỗ trợ một phần thôi, còn vai trò của các thầy cô thực sự là rất quan trọng, đặc biệt là khi giảng dạy tiếng Anh, học tiếng Anh là một cái môn học mà đòi hỏi rất nhiều sự giao tiếp, tương tác giữa các thầy cô với học sinh và giữa các học sinh với nhau nữa ạ. Vâng, và em hy vọng là buổi hội thảo ngày hôm nay thì đã mang lại thật nhiều những cái thông tin hữu ích đối với các thầy cô. Và sau đây sẽ là khoảng 15 phút để dành cho phần hỏi và trả lời. Nếu như các thầy cô có bất cứ câu hỏi nào dành cho thầy David thì xin mời các thầy cô hãy vui lòng gõ vào chat box ở trên Zoom. Hoặc là chúng em cũng có tiếp nhận toàn bộ các câu hỏi ở trên nền tảng YouTube và fanpage nữa ạ. Nên nếu các thầy cô có bất cứ câu hỏi nào thì các thầy cô vui lòng mình sẽ gõ thông tin vào trong chat box để chúng em có thể chuyển câu hỏi tới với cả diễn giả ngày hôm nay ạ.
Okay.
Yeah, we are waiting for any question from teachers. So yeah.
Okay, I was just going to show them this. First of all, I hope that you've managed to climb the tree a little bit. Okay, I hope so. So the Q&A. So the first question here, to expand ideas in speaking. Well, this is, if we want to look specifically at speaking, we would need another workshop. But the first thing I would say, and I did refer to this in this workshop, is introducing topics using vocabulary rather than just pictures or videos is quite useful in terms of giving students confidence to start actually speaking on the topic. And most important of all is the idea of the information gap. Okay, if there is no information gap, so this is something we've referred to several times today. If there is no information gap, then it is unlikely that any real communication will take place, right? But in terms of the last thing I would say in answer to that question is remember the importance of the fifth skill, the thinking time. So allowing students time to get their thoughts together before sharing with maybe one other person or a small group, and then later sharing with other people. And the fact that you share the same information several times helps to give students confidence in speaking. So I hope that helps a little in answer to that question. Okay, for adding games and so on in the teacher's book, well, I don't know.
Vâng ạ, cảm ơn góp ý của cô ạ. Chúng em cũng đang cố gắng đưa thật nhiều những cái hoạt động thú vị vào trong sách. Ngoài ra thì bởi vì sách giáo khoa thì những cái số trang nó cũng có hạn, và chúng em cũng có phát triển thêm những cái hệ thống công cụ hỗ trợ ở trên học liệu.vn và sẽ cố gắng đưa thêm những cái hoạt động và những cái trò chơi mà các thầy cô có thể tận dụng và có thể khai thác để đưa vào trong lớp học thực tế của mình ạ. Vâng, cảm ơn ý kiến của cô, thầy cô rất là nhiều ạ. We have next question, David.
Yeah, so when, again, I mentioned this, but we covered a lot in today's workshop. So when you have a very large class, I think the one of the important things is to think about the seating arrangement, okay? Of course, it's not ideal. We would all like to have smaller classes. But changing the seating arrangements, getting students into smaller groups, that is the first thing I would say. Should we use much compliments? Definitely, yeah. The more you can praise your students, the more positive they will feel. Help students practice their speaking skills at home. That's a difficult one because they perhaps do not have anyone to speak to, but you could use technology as a help. You could get students to prepare for a speaking task as homework in small groups. Perhaps creating a group discussion on Zalo, for example, or Viber, one of the more commonly used platforms in Vietnam. So I think technology can certainly help with that.
Okay, thank you.
The teacher's book, I'm sure, can be downloaded and printed. Am I right?
Yeah, I will answer this question.
Yeah.
Vâng, thưa cô, hiện tại thì các cái tài liệu bổ trợ cho sách giáo khoa tiếng Anh từ lớp 6 cho đến lớp 11 thì đang có thể tải về từ trên hệ thống của học liệu.vn ạ. Nếu như mà cô có gặp bất cứ vấn đề kỹ thuật nào mà khó khăn trong quá trình tải tài liệu thì cô có thể liên hệ trực tiếp với bộ phận hỗ trợ, có thể liên hệ trên số hotline hoặc là Zalo học liệu hoặc là fanpage học liệu để các bạn kỹ thuật viên có thể hỗ trợ cho cô ạ. Vâng, cảm ơn cô. So David, we have some questions from YouTube and Facebook fan page. So one of those is, how can I help my students to pay attention to the lesson, especially in the listening and communication lesson? Thank you.
It's, again, I would suggest that everyone reviews the slides, because maybe today we went quite fast, but one of the tips that I gave you early on in the talk today was to close the book to generate interest. If you open a book and say, hey, we're going to do a listening on page 31, they will not pay attention, okay? But if you have already created a more natural way of dealing with a task, which would be close the book, find out what the students, so let's say the listening is about health tips for teenagers. So you can talk about some ideas that the students already have. What do you think the listening will discuss? Yeah, what topics do you expect to hear? Write those topics on the board, and then say, okay, now we're going to open the book. We're going to do this listening, and not only are we going to do the comprehension task, but I want you to see which of the topics we predicted was mentioned. And because they have already discussed the topic with the book closed, they have a more natural interest in the listening. So this is one of the strategies that I often go back to.
Okay, thank you. So because of the limited time, I will only give you one more question before we finish the workshop. So I think it is the common interest of a lot of teachers. So Mr. David, could you please recommend us some sorts of teaching listening, because we can design grammar talks and reading talks, but we can not make audio files to teach. Thank you.
Okay, well, the book includes audio, right?
Yeah.
And I think one thing you can do is to use that audio in a more imaginative way, because quite often what teachers do is they will say, oh, okay, we've come to a listening task, you do the listening task, and that's it. You don't come back to it. Now, one thing you could do is, with the book closed, play the listening, ask the students to discuss what was the listening about, right? They don't need to know where it's from. They don't need to know what page of the book it's in. Okay, then you generate ideas. Then you listen to it again. Then you open the book. You listen to it again. Now, why am I saying this? Because I think you're right to ask me about listening, because it's possibly the weakest skill for many Vietnamese teenagers. So if you're able to listen to something 3 times, it is far more useful than listening to it only once. All right. So the idea that it is useful to listen to many different sources. All right. So YouTube, TV, radio, etc., podcasts. However, the problem there is that students only hear the listening 1 time. So I would say, think of ways to make them want to hear the listening again. All right. So one of them, and again, also with video. With video, play the sound without the image. All right. What is it about? Play the image without the sound. Play the 2 of them together without the book, without questions. Okay. Follow the listening in the book with another listening maybe on the same topic, or even, and sometimes we forget this, use the students as a resource. Okay. So for example, we've been talking about health tips for teenagers. Well, we don't have to make a poster. We can make a podcast, and each group makes a short podcast with advice, and each group listens to another group's podcast. That is also listening, right? Just because the other students are not native English speakers does not mean that it is not an authentic listening task.
Thank you, David. Vâng, về câu hỏi của cô thì nhà xuất bản cũng nắm được những cái khó khăn của các cô trong quá trình triển khai, cũng như là những còn thiếu rất là nhiều về cái nguồn ngữ liệu nghe. Thế thì trong năm nay thì nhà xuất bản cũng đang cố gắng triển khai để có thể làm thêm những cái hoạt động nghe, những cái tài liệu bổ trợ cho hoạt động nghe, để các thầy cô có thể có thêm một cái nguồn, những cái audio bổ trợ nghe để có thể có thêm những bài tập nghe cho học sinh của mình. Và những cái sản phẩm này, những cái nguồn học liệu này thì chúng em sẽ tiếp tục cập nhật trên hệ thống học liệu.vn trong năm học tới đối với sách tiếng Anh lớp 9, lớp 12 và cả các lớp ở phía dưới nữa. Cảm ơn các thầy cô rất là nhiều. Vâng, và hiện tại thì cũng đã là 4 giờ 45 phút rồi, cũng khá là muộn rồi ạ, một buổi chiều thứ Bảy, và các thầy cô đã dành thời gian để ở lại đến những cái phút cuối cùng của hội thảo ngày hôm nay. Ban tổ chức và nhà xuất bản thực sự là chân thành của các thầy cô. Cảm ơn các thầy cô rất là nhiều vì đã dành thời gian lắng nghe hội thảo, và chúng em rất là hy vọng là các thầy cô đã có thể có được những cái thông tin thực sự hữu ích trong cái buổi hội thảo này. Và thay mặt cho ban tổ chức thì xin được kính chúc các thầy cô luôn dồi dào sức khỏe và có thể có được thật nhiều những thành công, những thành tựu nhiều hơn nữa trong sự nghiệp giảng dạy của mình, đặc biệt là với giảng dạy môn tiếng Anh cho học sinh, và hy vọng là có thể được gặp lại các thầy cô đông đủ trong những hội thảo tiếp theo của Nhà xuất bản Giáo dục Việt Nam với bộ sách giáo khoa tiếng Anh Global Success. Và mọi thông tin về bộ sách các thầy cô hãy vui lòng theo dõi ở trên YouTube tiếng Anh Global Success và fanpage tiếng Anh Global Success, cũng như là fanpage và trang web học liệu.vn để có thể được tiếp cận những cái thông tin mới nhất, đầy đủ nhất và cập nhật nhất về những công cụ hỗ trợ mà Nhà xuất bản Giáo dục Việt Nam đang xây dựng và đang dành tặng đến các thầy cô để có thể sử dụng bộ sách tiếng Anh Global Success được hiệu quả và thuận lợi hơn. Cảm ơn thầy cô rất là nhiều và hẹn gặp lại các thầy cô. Thank you, David, a lot for the workshop today. It's really a great work, and see you next time in the next workshop.
Thank you. Thank
Bye.
you so much.
Thank you so much.
I hope to see you again.
See you
Okay.
again. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.